Dr. Howard C. Estep, president of World Prophetic Ministry Incorporated, continues his Bible study lecture series from the Old Testament book of Joshua. Dr. Estep is now speaking before the Bible study audience in the beautiful King is Coming Auditorium at Colton, California, and has his Bible open at Joshua chapter 19.
Our lesson tonight at various times is going to be read by Alexander Scorby, who has a magnificent voice and who is one of the few men who can read the scriptures, pronounce all of the difficult names, and place the emphasis where they should be. We have a lesson outline for you. Number 1, inheritance of Simeon. That's verses 1 through 9. Simeon is one of the tribes. 2, inheritance of Zebulun, verses 10 through 16. 3, inheritance of Issachar, verses 17 through 23. Number 4, inheritance of Asher, verses 24 through 31. And number 5, inheritance of Naphtali, verses 32 through 39. Now this is the disposition of certain areas of the land of the Canaanites that was given to these 5 tribes. In past studies, we have studied how God gave the land to the other tribes, and it's been somewhat boring, but yet interesting, and it's knowledgeable for you to know these things, or at least have a faint knowledge of them, because you can intelligently talk with folk who may converse with you as to why does Israel today claim the land of Palestine, which is the old Roman name for the now state of Israel. Well, you can tell them. If you have the map in the back of your Bible, you can show them the various land that was given to the tribes under Joshua about 1400 BC, long in there. And you can show them this is what God did. God did this through Joshua. And so Israel has now come back to the land, and she's only claiming or taking over the land that was rightfully hers, given to her by God, promised to Abraham about 2000 BC by God, when God said to Abraham in the 17th chapter of Genesis, verses 6 through 8, he says, I will give you the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. And about 400 years later, Joshua took the land of Canaan from the pagan tribes, and Joshua, as we're studying, gave the land in different areas to different tribes, and evidently he did it through divine providential direction, as we read the scriptures and have come to that conclusion. So we're looking at 5 of the tribes at this time as they received their inheritance. Now we're going to have verses 1 through 9 of chapter 19 read to us by Mr. Scorby. So if you'll watch your Bible carefully, in chapter 19, verses 1 through 9, this is the inheritance of Simeon.
And the second lot came forth to Simeon, even for the tribe of the children of Simeon, according to their families. And their inheritance was within the inheritance of the children of Judah. And they had in their inheritance Beersheba, or Sheba, and Molada, and Hazar-Shual, and Bela, and Azim, and Deltolad, and Beth-ul, and Hormah, and Ziklag, and Beth-Markaboth, and Hazar-Susa, and Beth-Lebaoth, and Sharuhen, 13 cities and their villages. Ain, Rimmon, and Ether, and Ashan, 4 cities and their villages. And all the villages that were round about these cities to Baalath-beer, Ramath of the south. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Simeon, according to their families. Out of the portion of the children of Judah was the inheritance of the children of Simeon. For the part of the children of Judah was too much for them. Therefore the children of Simeon had their inheritance within the inheritance of them.
Now we have had Mr. Scorby read verses 1 through 9, and he has read the boundaries for the inheritance of Simeon. Now if you'll notice in the latter part of verse 9, It says, for the part of the children of Judah was too much for them. If you look at your map that you have here, down below in the lower part of this map, you have Judah and Simeon. This is a lot of territory. And I've had the privilege of driving over much of that territory. The eastern side of this property, our land, is down here at the Dead Sea. And it's cliffs, rather extensive in largeness. And then you get up to a high altitude of about 3,000 feet down in here. So it's rather extensive. So what happened here, Simeon, who did not have any land, was given some of that which belonged to Judah. And that's rather interesting as to what we have read here in the 9th verse, the middle of verse 9. For the part of the children of Judah was too much for them, too big a land. They didn't have that many people in the tribe of Judah. It was too much land. Therefore, the children of Simeon had their inheritance within the inheritance of them. So Simeon really got part of the land that was originally given to Judah. So this is what we have read here, and this gives you the understanding as to why Simeon has this land down at the southern tip. And by the way, this is down in the desert, this area of Simeon, because right in the middle, the north of the Simeon land, or lot of land, is Beersheba. Beersheba. That's where Abraham made his headquarters, and that's known as the gateway to the big desert that goes down all the way down to the lower part of the peninsula, down to the Red Sea, Beersheba. And we've been to Beersheba on a number of occasions. Beersheba is known as the capital of the desert, and also they have a tremendous livestock exposition there on Thursdays, because Friday is their holy day for the Muslims, but on Thursday they have a sort of a livestock show, and they trade goats and camels, etc., etc. It's absolutely something to be amazed with. So there we have the land of Simeon is down at the tip of all of this land that was given to the tribes of Israel, and because Judah had too much, Simeon, one of the lesser tribes, smaller tribes, got the southern tip of the land belonging to Judah. So there we have the inheritance of Simeon. Now we move to the inheritance of Zebulun, and you'll notice Mr. Scorby Zebulun, but I've called it Zebulun, and so I'm going to stick by that. This is chapter 19, verses 10 through 16, and we listen to the voice of Mr. Scorby.
And the third lot came up for the children of Zebulun according to their families. And the border of their inheritance was unto Sarid. And their border went up toward the sea, and Maralah, and reached to Dabasheth, and reached to the river that is before Jokneam, and turned from Sarid eastward toward the sunrising unto the border of Kisloth-Tabor, and then goeth out to Daberath, and goeth up to Japhiah. And from thence passeth on along on the east to Gittahepher, to Ittachazin, and goeth out to Remon-Methoar, to Neah. And the border compasseth it on the north side to Hanathon, and the outgoings thereof are in the valley of Jiphthahel, and Katath, and Nahalel, and Shimron, and Idalah, and Bethlehem, 12 cities with their villages. This is the inheritance of the children of Zebulun, according to their families, these cities with their villages.
Now we've had verses 10 through 16 by Mr. Scorby, the inheritance of Zebulun, or Zebulun, which I prefer. And where do we find it? We find it, here's Judah, then we go up to Ephraim, Manasseh, and then right up above Manasseh, a little piece of land. It looks like a small piece of land, but it's quite a large territory. It's north of Manasseh, Zebulun. And there it is. It's locked in. It doesn't have any way out, so to speak, because to the east of it would be Naphtali, and west of it would be Asher, and down to the southeast would be Issachar. So we have this little piece of land locked in there, and really it's not a little piece of land when you start driving over it, because it's a tremendous section of the land. And this is what they call northern Galilee. Give you a little idea of the topography. It's very hilly. It's about 5,000 feet elevation. They have a lot of apple orchards. They have snow there in the winter time, very hilly, and lots of water, and various streams that are running down. So basically, they got a good piece of land because they're in the northern part. That's what they call Galilee in that particular part. That's in the area where the Syrians were shooting shells and rockets over to northern Galilee before we took over northern Galilee, before we took over the Golan Heights, so forth. Actually, the Golan Heights, you'll notice Manasseh at the top of your map on the right-hand side is Manasseh, and that's the land of the Golan Heights. And that's why I believe they're not going to give the Golan Heights back to Syria, because the Golan Heights was given to Israel under Joshua and under Moses and under Joshua after they routed out the pagan tribes out of the land of Canaan. So there we've had the boundaries for the land of Zebulun. Not too interesting, but yet very informative. Now we move to the inheritance of Issachar. This is verses 17-23. And again, we listen to the voice of Mr. Scorby.
And the fourth lot came out to Issachar, for the children of Issachar according to their families. And their border was toward Jezreel, and Kesoloth, and Shunem, and Hapharaim, and Shion, and Anaharath, and Rabbith, and Kishion, and Abez, and Remeth, and Enganim, and Enhada, and Bethpazes. And the coast reacheth to Tabor, and Shehazimah, and Bethshemesh. And the outgoings of their border were at Jordan, 16 cities with their villages. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Issachar according to their families, the cities and their villages.
Rather interesting. Issachar, you'll notice, is right down at the southeast corner of Zebulun. And it's right at the lower tip of the Sea of Galilee. That's what this body of water is there, a blank space. That's the Sea of Galilee. They're right at the lower edge of the Sea of Galilee, Issachar. Very, very fine land. Very wonderful land. It borders close to the Sea of Galilee. It's in the area where they have a lot of fruit groves. Also, they grow bananas, and they grow the various fruits in that particular area. The land is very fertile. And then the Jordan River flows down on the east bank of the land that the tribe of Issachar got, comes out of the Sea of Galilee, flows right down through to the northern tip of the Dead Sea. So they have fertile ground. It's level. It's right now it's one of the finest pieces of ground in all of Israel. It's truck farming. It's an irrigated, very green, very wonderful soil. So the tribe of Issachar really got a good piece of ground when they were allotted that particular bit of the ground. It's rather interesting that I wanted to tell you something about the tribe of Zebulun before we get too far away from it. But the tribe of Zebulun, when Jacob was on his deathbed, Jacob called all of his sons around him in the book of Genesis, and he told them what would befall them in the last days. Rather interesting. Reading from an article published, two different articles published about 1938. Now that's 45 years ago. Reading from one of the first articles, quote, Haifa's new harbor, built at a cost of $50 million, is insufficient for Palestine's vast and growing shipping trade. A new stretch of quay, 2/3 of a mile long, is being added so that 8 instead of 4 ships can moor alongside the shore, end quote. And then the second article says, quote, on Wednesday last, Haifa's harbor contained 32 ships, flying flags of 12 different nations, end quote. I'll add a third article to that. And may I say that Haifa is one of the most magnificent harbors in the Mediterranean Sea anywhere. They can handle up to 30, 40 ships without any problem. Tremendous harbor. Goods come in from all over the world. Now, what's the point in saying this? All right. Great difficulty was discovered and experienced in trying to locate a suitable place for Israel's harbor or for her shipping way back 45 years ago. Engineers worked for nearly 2 years going up and down the coast trying to locate the best possible site for the harbor. It was at last decided that the best location would be in a natural harbor lying on the coast at the foot of Mount Carmel, the land that was formerly occupied by the tribe of Zebulun. The tribe of Zebulun at that time actually went over near the coast, actually touched the coast. This was in the days of Canaan, but later on the tribe of Zebulun had land extended which went all the way over to the coast where Haifa is now located. It's rather interesting. 3,600 years previous to this, Jacob called his 12 sons around him, and he did not know that he was prophesying that the harbor of Haifa would be located, but the engineer that went up and down the coast searching out a place for a harbor finally decided that Haifa was the place to do it. But in the book of Genesis, chapter 49, verse 13, when the prophecy was being made, it says, quote, Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for a haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Genesis 49:13. So after their 12 sons had been married and produced families, who became the 12 tribes of Israel, and years later entered into the promised land, Zebulun was given that portion which included Mount Carmel and a Mediterranean coastline, and proving that God knows everything even before it ever happens. Quite interesting when we realize that we are doing business with a all-seeing, all-knowing God, and God has all knowledge under all circumstances. So there we've had Simeon, Zebulun, and Issachar. Now we move to the inheritance of Asher, and this will be rather interesting because Asher, if you'll notice as Mr. Scorby reads, Asher goes up to the town of Tyre, up in what is now Lebanon. And this is one of the things that is causing Washington, D.C. to be upset, is because the Israeli troops have created a 28-mile buffer zone north of Galilee up into the country of Lebanon, including the town of Tyre, which is a fishing village. We've been there a number of times. So now let's listen carefully relative to the inheritance of Asher, verses 24-31 by Mr. Scorby.
And the fifth lot came out for the tribe of the children of Asher according to their families. And their border was Helkath, and Halai, and Beaton, and Akshaph, and Alamelech, and Amad, and Mishael, and reacheth to Carmel westward, and to Shihor-Libnath, and turneth toward the sunrising to Beth-Dagon, and reacheth to Zebulun, and to the valley of Jiphthahel, toward the north side of Beth-Emek and Niel, and goeth out to Cabo on the left hand. And Hebron, and Rehob, and Hammon, and Cana, even unto great Zidon. And then the coast turneth to Ramah, and to the strong city Tyre, and the coast turneth to Hosa, and the outgoings thereof are at the sea from the coast to Achzib. Ummah also, and Aphek and Rehob, 22 cities with their villages. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Asher according to their families, these cities with their villages.
And of course, as we read this scripture, we don't really see all of the work and the planning that went into this, because God inspired Joshua to send men from each of the tribes that were searching out this land. And as we had in our last lesson, these men from the different tribes went through all of this land. They were to walk all of this borders and search out the land and come back with a written surveyor's report, equivalent to a surveyor's report, so that Joshua could look over their reports and then help to decide who got what land. And it's rather interesting, as you have noticed there in verse 29, and then the coast turneth to Ramah and to the strong city Tyre. You must remember, Lebanon is known in the Bible as the Phoenician Empire. They were great sailors, and they sent ships all over that part of the world, and they were tremendously famous in commerce, and also in cloth, and in shells, and in dyes, and things of that nature, valuable stones, silver, gold, jewelry, all kinds of paraphernalia. They were very famous, the Phoenicians were, and this is evidently why he mentions in verse 29, and to the strong city Tyre, because Tyre, up the coast there, you'll follow it on right up at the top end of the land given to Asher. You'll notice Tyre, and then you have Zarephath. That's where Elijah stayed with the widow. That's not in the territory of Asher. And then above Zarephath is Sidon, another fishing village. But Joshua gave Asher, one of the tribes, all of the land up into what is now southern Lebanon. And that's why the Israelites use this map as their guarantee and their grant deed for that much property in that part of the world. And they're a stickler for staying by the Bible as long as it accommodates them especially. So the tribe of Asher had absolutely fantastic ground given them. They had the seacoast of the Mediterranean on the west, and then they had the highlands of the mountains on the east, and they had access to the north and the south because a highway from Europe passed right down through that part of the land along the seacoast all the way down to Egypt. And the armies of the world traversed those highways in ages past as they were fighting the wars and sending troops. So Asher had fantastic property allotted them by Joshua there as he gave the land of Canaan over to the 12 tribes. So there we have the inheritance of Asher in verses 24 through 31. And now we move to the inheritance of Naphtali. Naphtali, verses 32 through 39. And we listen to the voice of Mr. Scorby.
The sixth lot came out to the children of Naphtali, even for the children of Naphtali according to their families. And their coast was from Heleph, from Allon to Zaananim, and Adamai, Nekeb, and Jabneel unto Lachem, and the outgoings thereof were at Jordan. And then the coast turneth westward to Aznoth Tabor, and goeth out from thence to Hukkok, and reacheth to Zebulun on the south side, and reacheth to Asher on the west side, and to Judah upon Jordan toward the sunrising. And the fenced cities are Ziddim, Zer, and Hamath, Rakkath, and Kinnereth, and Adamah, and Ramah, and Hazor, and Kedesh, and Edrei, and Enhazor, and Iron, and Migdalel, Horem, and Bethanath, and Bethshemesh, 19 cities with their villages. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Naphtali, according to their families, the cities and their villages.
So there we have the reading of the inheritance of Naphtali, verses 32 through 39. And again, this is extra fertile land. Those of us who have driven through this, and I've driven on a bus, naturally, with our tour, we've been through this. I can think of about 4 times we have driven right through this land all the way up to the boundaries to the area of Lebanon. And this is in the highlands, but yet it's very fertile land. In the northern part of Naphtali, they have the orchards, the apple orchards. They get snow there in the winter time. They have ample rainfall, beautiful streams of water coming down out of the highlands, flowing down through the farmlands. And they have farms, nice and green, just beautiful country. And this is what you read in the paper every once in a while about northern Galilee. When you're reading about northern Galilee, it's these 4 tribes at the north: Asher, Zebulun, Issachar, and Naphtali. That's what we call northern Galilee. And this is the area that the Syrians and the PLO in times past in southern Lebanon were shooting rockets and shells over into this area, and the Syrians were shooting the same over from the Golan Heights into that area. And this is why we had so many murders and killings and terrorist attacks in years gone by, that Israel decided to go up into the country of Lebanon and rout out the Palestinian Liberation Organization terrorist soldiers who were doing all of this. And of course, you hold in your hand, if you have this map, you hold in your hand the very document that is causing all of the fracas over there, because the Palestinians who have lived there for a few hundred years, they claim the land. This is theirs, they say. But yet the Israelites who have been dispersed from the land since 600 BC, about 587 BC by Nebuchadnezzar, and they've only been back intermittently, different groups of them, they say that we have come back to claim our land. It's true, they admit that we have been off the land, but they come back with the same argument that I've used many times, that God gave them this land. God gave it to Abraham before Abraham ever left Ur of the Chaldees in the 12th chapter of the book of Genesis. God said, I will show you a land and I will give you a land. Then in the 17th chapter, he tells Abraham exactly. He says, I'm going to give you all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. And then Abraham reaffirmed that in his son Isaac. Then Isaac reaffirmed it in his son Jacob, after Jacob bought the birthright from his brother, his older brother. And then Jacob had 12 sons, and those 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel. And all of these names that you see here on the map that we've been studying for the last 2 or 3 weeks, these are the sons of Jacob by 4 different women. And they're the ones who inherited the land, and they're back in the land accordingly as God promised them. And this just makes sense. And very seldom do you ever hear an explanation like that anyone takes the time to sit down and explain to you what's going on and why the animosity over there, and to show you the solution to the problem. This land belongs to Israel. Now the Palestinians, and bless their hearts, they're lovely people. Some of the dear friends that we have in the Middle East are Arabs, and we've had good relationship with them. We've had Arab guides and Arab bus drivers and Arab companies handling us, our tours as we've traveled over there on different occasions. But the Arabs among themselves do not get along. They do not have complete harmony among themselves. They do not trust each other. They are not willing to share and share alike like the Jews do. The Jews will finance other Jews anywhere in the world to come back to Israel because it's called the law of the return. Meaning to say that when Israel was incorporated as a nation in May of 1948, written into her constitution was a phrase known as the law of return, and that entitles any Jew anywhere in the world, in any country, if he can get a visa to leave that country, he is entitled to go back to Israel, his homeland, his motherland, and make that his home, and Israel will finance them from whatever country they're in to come to Israel, and Israel will set them up in a house, give them facilities to start housekeeping, put them into a job, usually in agriculture or something like that immediately. So it's a very simple solution. If the Palestinians, or I should say if the Arabs, would knit themselves together and they would do for the Arabs each other what the Israelis are doing for each other, then they could very easily set up all of the Arabs comfortably in a place in the Middle East, and they have plenty of land, the Arabs do. They could set up their wayward brothers, or their so-called, quote, outcast brothers, end quote, who have been ousted out of the land of Israel. They could set them up in an area and help finance them, and everything would be peaceful in that part of the world. But they don't do it. The Arabs use the displaced Arabs, known as PLOs. They use the displaced Arabs as a political pawn, P-A-W-N. They use them as a political pawn to get the attention of the world so they can focus in on a situation that really could be solved by the Arabs if they were willing to solve it. But they aren't willing to solve it. And some of your tax dollars, and you may not know this, some of your tax dollars go to the United Nations, and the United Nations in turn sets up refugee camps in the Middle East, in Arab countries, and some of your tax dollars go to feed and clothe those displaced Arab people who are out of the land of Israel. And multiplied billions of dollars of oil money. The oil is pumped out of the ground in the Arab states, and it goes into the coffers of the rich Arab oil-producing countries, and that money is put away, and they're creating big metropolitan cities and areas over there that are absolutely far above anything that we have in the United States, and their own blood brothers are going hungry and naked and living in little sun-parched houses in great, not concentration camps, but in displaced houses, camps where these PLO people, refugees, are residing. And in those camps, they don't have running water. They have no sanitary facilities. They have no screens on the doors. They all have television, though, for some reason or other. They can all get television. How they buy them, I don't know. So there's the story. A little extra that I didn't plan on sharing with you, but I felt that this was a good time to share it, and I thought I would share it with you at this time.